The day Scott brought Margaret home was Sabrina's birthday and the anniversary of their 20th anniversary. He frowned as he looked at the sumptuous meal on the table, and swept all the plates to the ground mercilessly. "Didn't you say don't do this again? No matter how much you do, I won't be able to forgive you." Then, Scott bowed his head and kissed Margaret's forehead. "Did it scare you?" She shook her head crookedly, tiptoed to drop a kiss on Scott's lips. "I'll go up and take a shower and wait for you." "Come on." Sabrina bit her lip to keep herself from crying, her nails almost digging into her flesh. She wanted to justify something, but in the end she just whispered, "It's my birthday, or our anniversary." "Anniversary," Scott sneered, "5 years ago today. I also went home full of joy and wanted to propose to you. But what kind of big surprise did you give me? Do you need me to remind you?" She lowered her head and didn't speak. And finally just silently bent down and began to clean up. Sharp ceramic shards cut through her fingertips, and blood continued to bubble out. The pain in her fingers combined with Scott's neglect caused Sabrina to cry out no longer. And the sound of sobbing echoing through the huge house made Scott irritated and a little overwhelmed. Scott called the babysitter and asked her to bandage her wounds, and she went upstairs without looking back, looking at the mess in front of her. Sabrina wiped her tears with her sleeve and emptied all the garbage into the trash can. The clanging sound brought her mind back to where it had been. Sabrina and Scott met on her 6th birthday, when she fell off a swing in a bulky princess dress. The adults were all chatting in the banquet hall, and no one noticed the little birthday boy who fell in the back garden. That's when Scott came along. He was 2 years older than Sabrina, but much taller than her. He reached out to Sabrina and gently pulled her up. "Are you all right?" The sun poured down on Scott's side face, and Sabrina's delicate eyebrows and immature but sharp face made Sabrina stunned and forgot to cry. She looked at him dumbly and smirked, and smacked in his face. "You look so good, I like you so much." Scott, who had always been moody and unflattering, instantly blushed and quickly looked away. At the right time, their parents didn't see them for a long time, so they came to the back garden to look for them. Seeing this scene, everyone smiled. Mrs. Sylvester smiled and said to Mrs. Volker, "I'm afraid our 2 children are destined." Mrs. Volker also smiled happily. "Why don't you let them order a baby kiss?" Sabrina heard the adults talking, put his head back, and looked him seriously into the eyes. "They said I would marry you when I grow up." In high school, they were both among the top in their grades, and they were opponents in everyone's eyes. But no matter how many people show up, they all firmly choose each other. One afternoon after a run, Scott suddenly put a jade ring on her hand. As the sun sets, Scott looks her eyes seriously. "Sabrina, let's get engaged when we graduate from college, shall we?" Sabrina's heart skipped a beat and a happy smile raised. "Yes, Scott, you must marry me." It wasn't until Sabrina's birthday 5 years ago that Scott retrieved his personally designed engagement ring and ordered 999 roses to propose to her. But halfway through, he received a video from an anonymous number. In the video, a woman is having fun with a man, and the passionate moans continue. The woman's face is clearly Sabrina, and the background is their room. Scott was instantly overwhelmed by the hatred and drove home. The moment he opened the door, he saw Sabrina coming down the stairs in a panic. Her voice trembled a little. "Scott, why are you back all of a sudden?" Scott sneered and angrily pushed open the door of the room, only to find nothing. And rummaging through the cabinets could not find the slightest trace of her cheating. He showed Sabrina the video she had received, her face getting paler and her hand in a hurry to explain. Scott simply shook off her hand and threw the diamond engagement ring he had prepared into her face. The sharp diamond scratching her face and beads of blood coming out. Sabrina was tempted to explain to him that she hadn't betrayed him, that the video was fake, and that she had been framed. Looking at her anniversary outfit in her study, Sabrina cried heartbreakingly. She picked up the discarded engagement ring with trembling hands, her heart aching, and she couldn't breathe. Since that day, the women Scott has brought home have been different every time. But they all have one thing in common: they are all more or less like Sabrina. That's how he told Sabrina that he would rather find a stand-in than touch her. Sabrina either didn't try to explain it to Scott, but every time he either didn't want to listen to it, or thought she was making up a story to fool herself. Over time, she gave up explaining. Sabrina believes that one day the truth will come out and Scott will change her mind. So even though she has been bruised all over her body in the past 5 years, she has never thought about leaving. But today, Sabrina is completely disappointed. She called her secretary and asked her to help her with her immigrant visa. The assistant sent her a message: "Miss Sabrina, your immigrant visa will take effect in half a month. The Volker family and the Sylvester family are world friends, and Mr. Volker misses Volker also grew up watching Sabrina grow up and loved her as her own daughter. Therefore, Sabrina still has to say goodbye to the second elder seriously. By the way, let's talk about the divorce, Mr. Volker. Mrs. Volker, I've figured it out. Over the years, my parents have offered me to go abroad to accompany them, and Scott is now, so I decided to break off my engagement with him and get out of here. The two elders of the Volker family are not unaware of what Scott has done in the past few years, and they have also drunk Scott several times to treat Sabrina well. But he completely takes it as a deaf ear. Mrs. Volker blushed and gently took her into her arms. Sabrina, it's this kid who is sorry for you, and Auntie doesn't blame you. When you go abroad, greet your mom and dad for us. Sabrina also quietly wiped away her tears and hugged her back with a smile. You and Mr. Volker have been so kind to me, and I will never forget it in my life. It's a pity that this baby kiss. We are destined to be inseparable after all. Hearing this, Mr. Volker and Mrs. Volker looked at each other, as if they wanted to say something, but they couldn't open their mouths. Sabrina patted Mrs. Volker's hand. You're my elder, just tell me something. Actually, Mr. Volker said slowly, after a moment's hesitation. When you were a kid, the person you made up for the baby wasn't Scott, it was his brother, right? Sabrina froze in place, digesting the fact, on your 6th birthday, Wright had fun with you in the back garden. So we talked to your parents about having a baby, but then Wright went abroad, and you don't seem to remember him anymore. That's when Scott came to us and said he liked you so much that he wanted to marry you to your Sylvester family. We see that he seems to love you sincerely, so he lied that he was the one who kissed you. Wright was sad to learn that you and Scott were in love after returning to China, but he didn't say anything when he saw that you were happy. Which was a disguised change. Sabrina always thought that the person she spent the day playing in the back garden when she was a kid was Scott. Although she noticed that Scott was missing a mole from the corner of his eye, he explained that he had spotted the mole and didn't suspect it anymore. It turns out that she has been recognizing the wrong person and loving the wrong person for so many years. Mrs. Volker hesitated and tentatively said, Wright hasn't been in a relationship for so many years, all he has always liked is you. You see if you are willing to give him. Before she could finish her sentence, Sabrina interrupted her first. I'm willing to marry Wright. In fact, in the past 5 years, a big reason for Sabrina to grit her teeth and persevere is because she doesn't want to believe that the person she has liked since she was a child would do this to her, now that we know that it was Wright and not Scott. It all made sense. Mr. Volker. Mrs. Volker was overjoyed. They didn't expect Sabrina to say yes so easily, and they hurriedly called Wright, who was far away. When the call went through, Sabrina asked, Can I have a few words with him? Mr. Volker hurriedly handed over his phone, the smile on his lips completely uncontrollable. Sabrina was silent for a few seconds before she spoke. Brother, long time no see. Wright's soft, warm voice came from the earpiece. Long time no see. My little fiancé. Wright said that Sabrina doesn't have to worry about anything. She just needs to take care of herself and leave everything to the Volker family to prepare. Sabrina felt a warmth in her heart, and she knew that being loved was what it should be like. She took Mr. Volker. Mrs. Volker's hand and said, Mr. Volker. Mrs. Volker, I don't want Scott to know about this before the official wedding. Is that okay? The two elders naturally didn't have any opinions. And they were also very angry at what Scott did, so they promised not to leak any news before the wedding. Sabrina added Wright's WeChat message and asked him when the wedding date was. Wright's chat box has been displayed for a long time in the input. It should be typed and deleted and typed, and finally sent a sentence. I'm tentatively set for half a month later. Do you think it's okay? If not, adjust the time, and everything is based on your wishes. Half a month later. Isn't that the time when the immigrant visa takes effect? Sabrina looked at Wright's avatar and smiled happily. His head is like a mud and sand castle that they built together when they were children. It seems that even the sky wants her to leave Scott and welcome her own happiness. Sabrina thought about going home and packing her things. After all, she was an immigrant, and she still had a lot to prepare, but she didn't expect that as soon as she entered the door. Scott's slap came over, and the corners of her mouth were swollen and bleeding. Scott looked at the slap print on her face, a flash of panic in his eyes, but quickly returned to normal. Sabrina covered her red and swollen left cheek and asked angrily, What are you doing? Scott threw a well-opened bouquet of lilies in her face and yelled, You still have the face to ask me what's wrong. You know that Margaret is allergic to lily pollen, and you still buy lilies back. Do you want her to die? When did I buy lilies and come back? How long has it been since I said you don't like flowers to come home? Don't you count in your heart? I thought that after these words, Scott would be able to regain some of his senses, but he didn't expect that he didn't listen to her explanation at all, and just blindly charged her. Besides you, who else in this family would dare to buy flowers back knowing that Margaret is allergic? I really didn't expect that you were so vicious. Don't you know that allergies will kill people? Sabrina's skin began to redden, with large and small rashes. She laughed to herself, scratching the rash on her skin with her hand, and she looked up at Scott with a sadness in her eyes. Scott, do you remember that I was also allergic to lily pollen? Looking at her allergy symptoms, Scott froze in place, and he really forgot that Sabrina was also a lily pollen allergy when she was in high school. Scott didn't know about Sabrina's lily pollen allergy and bought her a large bouquet of lilies to put in her room, which caused her to almost go into shock and spend a week in the hospital. Scott's eyes turned red, and he shook her hands and said sorry, promising that he would never forget it and that she would not let anything related to lilies appear around her. But Margaret told him that Sabrina had bought the lilies and put them in her room. Margaret had no reason to frame her. The only possibility was, thinking of this, Scott's face turned cold, and he sneered and looked at Sabrina. This is your bitter ploy again, right? I thought you would be allergic, so I didn't know if you were deliberately harming her. You'd better pray Margaret is okay or I'll want you to pay double the price. Sabrina's face flushed, and the suffocating sensation caused by the allergy made her resist scratching her neck with her hands, leaving red scratches on her fair skin. Scott takes her to the balcony and makes her kneel until Margaret heals. Sabrina turned to look at him in disbelief. I said I didn't do it. Why do you want me to kneel? His face was full of impatience and he kicked her in the joint. The sudden movement sent her legs bent and her knees slammed to the ground, and for a moment she felt like her bones were going to shatter. Until you get to this point, you can still be hard-mouthed, and until Margaret gets better. Don't think about playing tricks. With that, he turned and left. Sabrina couldn't hold herself out due to the allergic reaction and fell straight to the floor. The servants who had been ordered to guard her turned white with fright, and hurriedly brought her allergy medicine to feed her, and then took her back to her room. Scott didn't embarrass her anymore, but told the maid to keep an eye on her and not let her take a step out of the house. When Sabrina wakes up from her slumber, she discovers more than 100 unread messages, all of which Margaret has sent her. She masochistically looked at the pictures one by one. In the first, Scott squinted in front of Margaret's hospital bed, holding her hand tightly and not letting go. The seventh, a steaming bowl of millet porridge, was boiled by Scott himself. In the 15th, Scott combs her hair with gentle eyes and makes several grimaces. On the 34th, Margaret has a string of Buddhist beads on her left wrist, the one Sabrina is reluctant to take off and put on her, no matter what she says. Every photo is a reminder of how much Sabrina really resembles a joke. Tiredly, she blocked Margaret's WeChat, rummaged through her suitcase and began to pack her things, and sent a message to her secretary to expedite her immigrant visa. After a moment, the assistant replied, Miss Sabrina, your immigrant visa is being expedited and will take effect in a week at most. Sabrina flipped through a thick album of photos of her and Scott from childhood to adulthood, from friends to lovers. In the photo, she looks happily at the camera, and Scott looks sideways at her with loving eyes, and she can't help but think that vows are only counted when they are in love. She took the photos from the years and the gifts Scott gave her, and set them on fire on the balcony. The intense light of the fire took away 20 years of memories and the only remaining love Sabrina had for Scott. From now on, Sabrina doesn't love Scott anymore. 2 days later, Scott sent someone to bring a water blue dress skirt and left a note. There's a charity dinner tonight. Wear it and follow me to the dinner. Sabrina froze in place. Since 5 years ago, Scott has hardly taken her to major public occasions. And every time he brings his secretary or lover, how can he, this time? If it had been before, Sabrina would have jumped up and down with joy, but now that her heart is dead, it doesn't matter to her whether Scott takes her to the banquet or not. In the evening, Scott came to pick her up. When he saw Sabrina, who looked exquisitely make-up and had a good figure, Scott's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but admit that Sabrina was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And his affection for her back then was more or less due to her appearance. Sabrina was about to open the back seat door when the window slowly lowered, revealing Margaret's smiling face. She deliberately tightened Scott's arm and pretended to apologize. The back seat is full for me and Scott, and it's hard for you to sit in the passenger seat. Scott glanced at her and said in a cold tone, the co-pilot is your place. I'm calling you tonight to be a babysitter and serve me and Margaret well. And don't be delusional about things that don't belong to you. Sabrina was stunned for a moment, and couldn't help but smile bitterly and curse herself in her heart. Today, you are still fantasizing about his love. How can you not be bruised all over your body? She nodded submissively. I see. Scott had expected her to argue sadly, but he hadn't expected her to be so docile, and his heart suddenly throbbed, and he felt that something was getting out of his grasp. Before the charity dinner began, everyone in the banquet hall was greeting each other with their own thoughts. Scott takes Margaret backstage to prepare, leaving her alone on the spot, where she looks out of place with no desire to socialize. The people around her always looked at Sabrina from time to time, and the whispering voice made her feel uncomfortable. She took the champagne from the waitress and hurried to the corner to sit. The feeling of being the focus of attention for no reason really made her breathless. There were two girls with their backs to Sabrina and they happened to be discussing her affairs. Sabrina crept closer, and she heard one of the girls say, "Did you see the dress of the Sylvester daughter? I remember it was hand-sewn by a French designer, and there was only one in the world. Yes, I remember when Scott, the son of the Volker family, bought it and gave it to him, right? How could it happen to her? Why else? It must be something that others don't want for her. It's no wonder that as soon as Sabrina comes in, everyone is whispering about her. And it's no wonder that Scott suddenly sends her something. It turns out that it's because Margaret doesn't want it." The door to the banquet opened suddenly, and Scott walked in with Margaret's hand. Margaret's haute couture dress was encrusted with sparkling diamonds and sparkled in the light. Scott led her to the center of the hall with a doting face, and the brightest lights in the room followed their pace, making them a perfect couple. This was undoubtedly a public humiliation to Sabrina, who felt that her face was ridiculously hot, and the chatter around her almost drowned her out. "Isn't that the daughter of the Sylvester family? I remember that she and Scott were childhood sweethearts. How could this be? What about childhood sweethearts? It's not like it can't fall from the sky. What a god. That woman is just Scott's lover, and Sabrina is the real girlfriend. But now it seems that the main palace is no more than a junior. Don't you know, I heard that Sabrina cheated on her before. That's why Scott did this to her, and she deserved it. If I could be with Scott, I'd love to marry him." Sabrina doesn't know what to do. Sabrina limply hid in the corner, not daring to make a sound. Trying to temper her presence in the eyes of everyone, Scott named her and asked her to shine Margaret's shoes in full view. Sabrina was resisting, and Scott leaned into her ear and whispered, "You don't want the video from 5 years ago to be released in public." Her eyes turned red and she bit her lip to keep herself from crying, and she crouched down and wiped the toes of Margaret's shoes with the hem of her skirt. Margaret smiled hypocritically. "Thank you, Sabrina," Scott said in a voice that only the three of them could hear. "I just want you to know that a woman who has been played by other men is only worthy of using what other women have used." Luckily, Scott was too busy entertaining to give Sabrina time to catch her breath. Sabrina crept to the second-floor platform to breathe, and the evening breeze dispelled some of the boredom in her heart. In the middle of the dinner, she received a text message from Wright saying that everything was going well and that her tense nerves were finally able to relax a little. She was resting with her eyes closed, when the sound of clattering high heels came from behind her. Sabrina jerked back to see Margaret walking with a smug smile. A bad premonition suddenly rose in her heart, and she turned to leave, but was stopped by Margaret. "When you see me, leave. Why are you weak-hearted?" Margaret defiantly. "I didn't expect that the eldest lady of the Sylvester family would shine my shoes in public, which really flattered me." Sabrina turned to look at her coldly. "Am I weak? You're the one who should be empty-hearted, right? Do you think Scott really loves you? He only loves himself, and he doesn't know how he dies in the end. Of course I know he doesn't love me anymore, but so what? Now he's spoiling me." Seeing Margaret's appearance throb, Sabrina's heart throbbed. In college, Margaret was her best friend, and the two of them had a good relationship enough to wear a pair of pants. In her sophomore year, Sabrina was in a car accident and needed a blood transfusion, and Margaret didn't hesitate to step up. Since then, Sabrina has been eager to share her world, introduce her to her own circle, introduce her friends to her, and introduce her to Scott. But what Sabrina didn't expect was that she would approach Scott immediately after she was misunderstood, and even hurt herself over and over again with him. Margaret seemed to see through her thoughts, took a step closer to her, and whispered in her ear, "You don't know yet, do you? The video of your cheating back then was faked by someone I sent to Scott." "Why are you doing this?" Sabrina angrily yelled at her. "Why do you do this to me when I think you're my best sister?" Margaret looked at her disdainfully. "People don't kill for themselves, otherwise, how can I get close to Scott? It's just that I didn't expect that he didn't even check it and believed it, and it seems that he doesn't love you much." Sabrina's eyes turned red instantly. Yes, Margaret was wrong. Why wasn't Scott? "Do you remember when you first graduated? Scott said he was waiting for you all day. You had a Cold War for a month. Do you know why? Because I quietly used your mobile phone to delete the messages he sent you, and asked you to release his pigeons, causing you to quarrel. Every time Margaret said something, Sabrina's heart cooled. She didn't expect that so many fights with Scott in the past were caused by her best friend. She didn't expect that introducing Scott to her out of girlfriend friendship and trust would make her covet him. And even give up her girlfriend relationship. Sabrina didn't want to listen anymore, shook off her hand and turned to leave. Not far away, Scott was walking slowly. A thought rose in Margaret's mind. And she grabbed Sabrina's hand and placed it on her body, sinister grinning. Guess what would happen if he saw you pushing me down? With that, Margaret let go of her hand and fell back, shouting, Sabrina, I really didn't want to rob Scott from you. Please, let me go. Sabrina reacted and tried to catch her at first, but it was too late. Scott hurried over and slapped her hard without asking. You dare to push Margaret downstairs. If something happens to Margaret, I'll pay you back 100-fold. I didn't. Sabrina tried feebly to explain, but before she could finish her sentence, he shook her away. Scott hurriedly ran downstairs and hugged Margaret away, and Sabrina could clearly see the smug and mockery in her eyes. With a cold face, he instructed the 2 bodyguards beside him, tie Sabrina back to me and lock me up while I settle the score. Sabrina was locked up in the basement for 2 days and 2 nights waiting for Scott. And when she was carried up to the 3rd floor roof by bodyguards, she had no strength to resist. In the past 2 days and 2 nights, she didn't drink a sip of water, didn't eat anything, and her whole person was extremely weak and at the mercy of others. The bodyguards pinned Sabrina to the edge of the rooftop, half of her body leaning out, half dangling in the air. As a child, Sabrina accidentally fell from the 2nd floor, causing her to have some fear of heights. Since then, she has not dared to look down beyond 2 floors. That's what Scott knows, but now he ordered someone to take her to the edge of the rooftop. Leaving her in a state of extreme panic, Scott pinched Sabrina's chin hard, forcing her to look down. Fear made her brow break out in fine sweat, and she was trembling almost all over, begging him to spare her. You know you're scared now. When Margaret begged you to let her go, why couldn't you let her go? It's not me. It's really not me. I didn't push Margaret downstairs. Sabrina's voice was tinged with tears. Please, Scott, believe me. I really didn't push her downstairs, Scott sneered, pulling her body a little further out. I saw you push her downstairs with my own eyes, and you dare to quibble. It's good that Margaret is okay this time, otherwise, your fate will only be 100 times worse. He ordered a sturdy hemp rope to be found, tied Sabrina's hands together, and tied the other end of the rope to a stone pillar on the edge of the rooftop, so that she was suspended in the air. Sabrina's face turned pale, and she couldn't help but tremble with fear of falling down. She was hung in the air for an hour before Scott was willing to ask someone to put her down. Sabrina thought that this was the end of the punishment, but she didn't think that the next second, Scott had 2 bodyguards carry her to the edge of the rooftop. Since you caused Margaret to fall from the upper floor, let's try it. Push Sabrina off the rooftop. No matter how much Sabrina begged for mercy, Scott ignored it. Sabrina wept in despair and asked in a trembling voice, Scott, why don't you want to believe me? 5 years ago you didn't believe me, and now you don't want to believe me. Don't you know what kind of person I am in the past 20 years? Am I so wicked in your heart? Scott snapped her off. I know who you are. The moment you betrayed me 5 years ago, I knew you couldn't do anything. Sabrina, this is what you owe me. It's what you owe Margaret. Sabrina smiled wryly, no longer explaining anything. After getting Scott's will, the bodyguard releases Sabrina, who falls hard to the ground, her legs broken and confused. In the haze, Sabrina saw Scott walking down with his bodyguards, and she seemed to see in his eyes unbearable and regretful, but fleeting. She laughed at herself in her heart. Sabrina don't have any hope for him anymore. He's not the Scott who loves him anymore. Before losing consciousness, Sabrina vaguely overhears Scott and the bodyguard talking. One of the bodyguards hesitated and then spoke. Mr. Scott, you actually know that the incident that day was directed and acted by Miss Margaret, and it has nothing to do with Miss Sabrina. She was wronged. Another bodyguard also tentatively said, yes, and Miss Margaret didn't suffer any injuries. Just a little scratched skin. Why do you have to? Why do this to her? Sabrina completes the question in her mind. Scott lit a cigarette and spoke slowly after a moment of silence, for she betrayed me, and she will pay back what she owes me. Sabrina wakes up to find herself in a hospital bed, choking on the pungent smell of disinfectant water. She didn't see anyone in the room except herself. Come to think of it, Scott hates himself so much, and his fate is also due to him. How could he come after the nurse saw her wake up? She gently checked her body. Your body is fine, and the fractures of your legs are not very serious. As long as you recuperate quietly for a while, you will be fine. By the way, the man who sent you here is your boyfriend, right? Need to tell him the news you're awake? No thanks, Sabrina hurriedly stopped. She just wanted to get through the last few days in peace, and she didn't want to have anything to do with Scott anymore. After the nurse left, Sabrina wanted to sleep a little longer. When suddenly the phone rang and the caller showed right, Sabrina worries if something is wrong and quickly picks up the phone. What's wrong? I have taken care of all the company's affairs in the past few days, and the wedding has also been arranged. Would you like to bring our wedding forward just in time? Her secretary sent her a message. Miss Sabrina, your immigrant visa is ready. The boulder in Sabrina's heart finally landed, and her tone was much more relaxed. I do. And when are you flying over? Or I'll go back and pick you up and come along. Sabrina was worried that this would startle the snake, so she refused. No, I haven't finished packing my things. I'll go over when I'm done. The door to the hospital room was pushed open, and Scott barged in with a gloomy face. Sabrina quickly covered the receiver and whispered that she had something to do before she hung up the phone, afraid that Scott would know about it. What to pack? Where are you going? Scott's face was frighteningly dark, and he walked over and grabbed her wrist and asked coldly. Sabrina pulled her hand out with all her might, and there was already a faint red handprint on her white wrist. I didn't go anywhere. My mother said she missed me and wanted me to go home to see their two elders. Hearing this, Scott didn't continue to investigate, but pushed a wheelchair and pushed her out without saying a word. Scott, where are you taking me? Fear gripped Sabrina, who struggled desperately, but because of the casts on her legs, it didn't help. After walking more than half the floor, Scott stopped and looked at the words matching room in front of him, and Sabrina almost fainted. Two bodyguards put her dead in front of the phlebotomy table, and Scott orders the nurse to draw her blood for matching. Sabrina struggled desperately to break free, but to no avail. She could only watch as the glowing needles plunged into her veins. What the hell are you going to do? Sabrina slumped in her wheelchair in despair, her eyes blank. Scott was silent for a few seconds. Margaret had a car accident and a ruptured kidney. If the match is successful, you donate a kidney to her. Sabrina couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why should I donate to her? I don't know her, but you owe me. Scott interrupted her impatiently. Besides, it's just a kidney, and it's not going to die. So you can't let Margaret have an accident. She laughed sadly. Margaret can't have an accident, so it's going to hurt her. Sabrina, does she, Sabrina, deserve this? Half an hour later, the doctor came in a hurry and said that the match was successful. Sabrina closed her eyes in despair. Tears streaming down her face, Scott didn't care about anything, and asked the doctor to rush her into the operating room. I must make sure Margaret is okay. If something happens to Margaret, I want your hospital to bury her. Sabrina lay on the cold operating table, looking at Margaret, unconscious in the next bed, her heart aching like a knife. The anesthetic slowly advanced, and Sabrina soon lost consciousness. When she woke up from her hospital bed, Sabrina was in a terrible state. As if she would lose her life in the next second. After the anesthetic has expired, the wound left by the kidney removal is still painful, but no matter how physical the pain is, it is not as painful as the psychological pain. Sabrina caressed her wounds, tears unstoppable. She didn't know why the man who had loved her for more than 10 years, the man who would be so anxious to die even if he was hurt a little, would hurt himself like this for other women. In a gym class in her sophomore year of high school, Sabrina accidentally tripped and got a large cut on the back of her calf, bleeding profusely, and finally had more than 10 stitches. Sabrina was most afraid of the pain, crying so much that she couldn't stop crying during the stitches, and Scott listened to her crying outside, more anxious than her, and paced back and forth with red eyes. She was so worried about the scar that she burst into tears. Scott kept asking people to find the right scar cream and asked the doctor how he could minimize the impact. On the day the stitches were removed, Scott took her into his arms and apologized to her over and over again, saying that he didn't protect her. Scott swore with 3 fingers up, his eyes full of seriousness. I swear I'm going to protect Sabrina from now on and I won't let her get hurt. But now, Scott has put behind the vows he once made, for 5 years. Every wound on Sabrina's body came from him, and he wounded her over and over again for Margaret. The moment the room door was pushed open, Sabrina was already experiencing a stress response, instinctively clutching the edge of the pillow and acting defensively, only to relax a little when she saw that it was the doctor. She thought that the doctor had come to take her to check her condition, so she obediently sat in a wheelchair and let him take her. And by the time she realized that something was wrong, it was too late. Sabrina watched in disbelief as she was taken to the phlebotoming room by the doctor, and when she saw Scott frowning on the side, she calmed down instead. What are you going to take from me this time? Heart, or the liver, or something else? Sabrina's pale face was full of mockery, and her mood was surprisingly calm. Looking at her like this, Scott felt flustered for no reason, but remembering Margaret in the operating room. He still spoke indifferently. Margaret was bleeding profusely. She gave you a blood transfusion when she was in college, and now it's your turn to give it back to her. Scott, I just had a kidney taken away from you, and I woke up in less than half an hour. Are you human? Scott was rarely silent for a moment. I asked the doctor, and he said that you can donate blood in your current condition, as long as it is in moderation. What about me? Is my life really not important to you at all? Do you think it doesn't matter if I'm dead? The phlebotomy room fell into extreme silence. No one spoke, and all that remained was Sabrina's small sobs. Scott sighed slightly. I promise you, after you donate your blood to Margaret, our past feuds will be erased. We'll get married when you're well, and we'll live a good life in the future. Okay, it seems to be an inquiry, but Sabrina has no choice at all. She can only accept and be forced to accept. Cold needles pierced Sabrina's veins, and she felt like her life was draining with blood. She watched as the doctor pumped bag after bag of blood until she was full of 1,000 cubic centimeters and didn't stop until she was full, and she didn't even have the strength to stand up. Sabrina fell limply to the ground and looked at Scott with her arms. Scott, I never owe you anything, and from now on, you and I will never have any friendship or relationship. Scott's heart throbbed so badly that he felt as if he was really going to lose Sabrina, but patted her on the shoulder and left. You have a good rest. I promise you, I will definitely marry you. Sabrina looked mockingly at his departing back, meditating in her mind. I'm not going to marry you, Scott, ever. Excessive physical overdraft caused Sabrina to be in a coma for 3 full days before waking up. She woke up in a daze just in time to meet the nurse's concerned eyes, who let out a long sigh when she saw her awake. You finally woke up. You have been in a coma for 3 days. Your vital signs are very weak, and you almost can't be saved, but fortunately you have a great life. The sun outside the window is infinitely good, and the bright sunlight shines on the small green potted plants, which is full of vitality, just like Sabrina. After today, she'll have a complete new lease on life. When she woke up, the first thing Sabrina did was go through the discharge procedures and then called her secretary to pick her up with her passport. In another room, Scott is gently blowing cold fish soup and feeding it to Margaret's mouth. Margaret's face was red, like a little girl who had just fallen in love, and she raised an innocent smile. Scott, you are so good to me, thank you. He rubbed the top of her hair with one free hand. Thank you for being so good. Margaret seemed to remember something, and suddenly became sad. It's just hard work, Sabrina. Donating my kidney and donating blood to me. How is she now? She knew very well that Scott was a person and that she needed to show weakness and bring up Sabrina as a person to arouse resentment in his heart. Sure enough, Scott froze instantly, and his smile faded a little. I sent someone to see it in the morning, and I'm still unconscious. It's okay. It's most important for you to take care of yourself. A flash of panic and nervousness flashed in his eyes, which Margaret captured. Worried that Scott still has no feelings for Sabrina, she stirs up trouble again. Actually, I'm really thankful to Sabrina. Scott, can you just forgive her for the wrong things she did before? Whether she betrays you or she hurts me, forgive her. Scott's face immediately turned cold when he heard Margaret mention what Sabrina had done, and he snorted sarcastically. She owes me and you, and she can't pay it off in this life. Only this time, she did give up almost her entire life to save you, and I would consider letting her go for the time being. Scott's cell phone rang suddenly, and it was right. Brother, call me at this time. What's the matter? You fly to Germany tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow I get married, and you have to come to participate. Scott froze. He remembered that the brother had never had a crush on any woman, and he had to wonder if he liked men anymore. As a result, now he actually said that he was going to get married, which was too sudden. So suddenly. Okay, then I'll buy a plane ticket later. Happy newlywed brother, Wright's playful voice came. You have to come and bless me in person before I can be truly happy. After hanging up, Scott leaves the room on the grounds that he has something to do, ready to talk to Sabrina about it and take her back with him. The promise to get married that day, he was serious. He really decided to marry this woman he loved and only loved. But when he pushed open the door to Sabrina's room, it was empty, not a single cup left. He suddenly felt very uneasy in his heart, and hurriedly pulled over a nurse to ask about the situation, and the nurse looked at him with a strange expression. Miss Sabrina has already completed the discharge procedures and left an hour ago. Didn't she tell you? Scott quickly took out his cell phone and called her, but no one answered, several of them, thinking that he had been too much to her during this time. He felt that she might be losing her temper with herself, so she didn't dig deeper, but just sent her a message: pack your bags tonight, fly with me to Germany tomorrow for my brother's wedding. And introduce my other relatives to you by the way, and set our wedding date. Inside the airport, Sabrina had just boarded the plane, and the sun was shining a little brightly outside the window, but in her opinion, these were symbols of hope. Looking at the messages on her phone, she just felt ridiculous. People only know deeply when they go, and late affection is cheaper than grass. Sabrina pulls out her phone card and breaks it in half and throws it into the mineral water bottle in front of her. And from now on she wants to start a new life without Scott, at the Volker family estate in Germany. The lawn is filled with purple and white violets, Sabrina's favorite flowers, which she has looked forward to covering her wedding with more than once. The guest table was filled with family and friends of the newlyweds, and everyone had heartfelt blessings on their faces. Mr. Volker, Mrs. Volker, and Mr. Sylvester, Mrs. Sylvester were already red-eyed. Scott waited and waited and waited without seeing Sabrina, calling and not replying to messages, and his mind was in a state of chaos. The wedding march sounded at the scene, and the bride appeared in a haute couture handmade wedding dress. The moment Scott saw his future sister-in-law's face, he broke down. On the other end of the red carpet stood a delicate beauty, with her soft black hair tied into a bun. And the 2 locks of hair hanging down from her forehead were just right. A light makeup accentuates the beautiful facial features, and the diamond-encrusted wedding dress shines in the sun. The moment he saw Sabrina's face, Scott broke down, and he immediately got up from his position and tried to rush over to ask her what was going on, but was pressed to his seat by the bodyguard who had been on standby for a long time. Wright looked very calm with an expectant and happy smile on his face. But his slightly trembling hands betrayed the turmoil in his heart. Marrying the beloved is like winning a battle. Wright looked at the girl he had loved for 20 years, wearing a wedding dress designed by someone he had personally designed, holding a bouquet of flowers that he had planted himself, and walking towards him with love. How could he not be excited, whether poor or rich, sick or healthy? I am willing to marry Ms. Sabrina as my legal wife and grow old, whether poor or rich, sick or healthy. I am willing to marry Mr. Wright as my legal husband and grow old. At the moment of the ceremony, thousands of colorful balloons rose and flew wildly under the blue sky. The colorful glitters in the ceremonial flowers reflect different lights and shimmer on Sabrina's veil, making for a romantic scene. Scott's eyes cracked, and he tried to rush to Sabrina's side, but he was imprisoned by the bodyguards, and his mouth was covered, and he could only make a stumbling sound. In the midst of all the excitement, no one paid any attention to Scott's side, and he could only watch in despair as she married someone else, who was still his brother. He struggled from the beginning to the end of the resigned movement, quietly sitting in his position and watching it all. After staying up late into the evening, the wedding finally came to an end, and Scott stopped Sabrina, who had just finished entertaining guests. What do you mean by that? Are you uniting with my brother to act in a special scene to anger me? Sabrina frowned and shook off his hand with an inexplicable expression. You have a little respect. I'm your sister-in-law. Besides, what do you care about me? Do I need to be angry with you for acting? Didn't I say I'd marry you? What do you mean by marrying my brother now? Scott, do you think your marrying me is a heavenly reward? Do I have to be grateful to you? Sabrina was really annoyed. She really couldn't figure out why she had loved such a person for more than 10 years. I say one last time, I don't love you anymore. Don't come and disturb my life in the future. I feel sick when I see you. You only make me feel like I've loved a scumbag for the past 10 years. He was about to say something, but Wright came over and interrupted their conversation. Wright smiled faintly, but his tone was extremely tough and cold. The wedding is over. I'll find someone to send you back tomorrow, and you can accompany your parents. Brother, why did you snatch my girlfriend? Wright frowned, and just as he tried to explain, Sabrina spoke first. She looked at him with a sneer. Girlfriend? Isn't your girlfriend Margaret? When you asked me to shine her shoes in public, pushed me down from the 3rd floor, and forced me to donate blood and kidneys to her, why didn't you say that I was your girlfriend? After saying that, Sabrina pulled Wright and walked out, and Wright kissed her on the hair dotingly. You go back first. I'll go to you after I explain a few words to him. The next second, he took off all his disguised kindness and looked at Scott, and said to him in an unquestioning tone, I warn you, if you come to harass my wife again, I will not let you go. I gave you a chance, but you didn't use it and hurt her again and again. Now that I'm back, no one wants to hurt Sabrina anymore. Despite Scott's reluctance, the Volker family was led by Wright, and he had to obey his arrangement to return home first. As soon as he got off the plane, he sent a message to his assistant asking him to investigate when Wright and Sabrina hooked up. Scott's cell phone rang, and it was a strange caller. "Is that Scott? I'm Margaret's best friend." She suddenly fainted, and now in the hospital. "Come on." Scott went straight to the hospital before he could even get home. And when he opened the door to the ward, he saw Margaret spurt out a mouthful of blood, staining the snow-white quilt red. Margaret's face was almost whiter than the wall, and his mouth was bloodshot. The moment I saw Scott, my dead eyes finally lit up. "Scott, you're back. Where have you been these 2 days? I can't get in touch with you. I'm worried about you." He then remembered that when he attended the wedding in the past 2 days, he was not in the mood to look at his phone at all. So naturally he did not contact Margaret. Thinking of this, he felt a little guilty in his heart. Scott walked over and took her into his arms. "I've been so busy these days that I haven't read the information." The doctor walked in with the case and examination report with a solemn face. "Doctor, how is my health?" Margaret's voice trembled. "According to the examination report, Miss Margaret's kidney was rejected, which is why there were some complications. The situation is definitely not optimistic, and if it continues to deteriorate, I am afraid that I will have to have another operation." Margaret's eyes turned red and she threw herself into Scott's arms and cried, listening to the doctor's words. Scott's first thought was Sabrina, who had one kidney removed, and he was worried about whether Sabrina would also have postoperative complications and whether her health would get worse and worse. At this moment, Scott regretted that he shouldn't have hurt her like this for an outsider, who was also a living person. Scott was distracted, and he didn't listen to a word of what the doctor said next, and it was Margaret who patted his hand before he came to his senses. Just out of her mind. "How is she doing again?" A hint of displeasure flashed in Margaret's eyes, but there was still a thoughtful look on his face. "Doctor, thank you for saying it again," the doctor repeated, frowning and raising his voice as Scott watched Scott lose his mind again. "The worst scenario at the moment is that we need to have another operation, but our hospital does not have a blood bank of Miss Margaret's blood type, and it is not easy to transfer from other hospitals. The implication is that someone needs to be a mobile blood bank, such as Sabrina in the past." Margaret immediately took Scott's hand and began pleading with him. "Scott, I know it's bad, but I really don't want to die. Can you let Sabrina donate my blood one more time, for the last time?" Scott's face immediately sank. "What do you think of Sabrina, moving the blood bank? Last time she donated so much blood to you, and you were in a coma for so long, you still want to hurt her?" Margaret had never seen him defend Sabrina like this, and he was a little flustered, and his resentment towards Sabrina deepened. She squeezed out 2 tears and pretended to be a delicate little flower. "I'm sorry. I'm just too scared." "You're right. Sabrina has done so much for me, and I shouldn't be delusional. Maybe this is my destiny, and I am destined to leave." Scott's face softened and his voice softer. "I didn't mean that. It's just that I can't get her back right now." "Why?" He was silent for a while, and replied bitterly, "She is married, and now she has nothing to do with me, and she doesn't even want to see me." This was great news for Margaret, who took several deep breaths before pressing down on the joy in her heart. "It's okay, Scott. I will always be by your side. I will definitely actively cooperate with the treatment and get better soon. When I get better, let's get married, shall we? I really love you and I want to be with you for the rest of my life." Scott was only irritated by this. He had never thought of marrying Margaret enough, and his only bride could only be Sabrina. And she was nothing more than a tool to get revenge on Sabrina. He was about to make it clear to Margaret when his assistant called. "Mr. Scott, do you have time to go back to the company now? I've found out about your brother and Miss Sabrina." The assistant compiled what he had investigated into a report that clearly documented every place Sabrina had gone and everyone she had met during this time. Scott looked at the Sabrina immigrant visa application time and felt a pain in his heart. He only now realizes that Sabrina had already thought about leaving him so early, and that she was really completely dead to herself. It seems that since 5 years ago, Sabrina has prepared a hearty meal for every birthday, and he will always bring different girls home to stimulate her, even her best friend. He thought that she would never leave him because of his love for him, so he recklessly hurt her again and again, and did excessive things to her again and again. Thinking back to Sabrina explaining to herself more than once that she hadn't betrayed him, Scott suddenly felt that it wasn't that simple. For the first time in 5 years, he was willing to think about her explanation, willing to doubt the authenticity of that video. In the past, no matter how many times Sabrina explained, even if she almost knelt down to beg him, he never took her words seriously. only felt that she was constantly making excuses, sure enough. Only when you lose can you know how to cherish it. You go and check that video of Sabrina for me. I think Sabrina may have really been wronged, he commanded. The assistant nodded. Also, I found out that Miss Sabrina went to your parents' house on the day she processed her visa. Maybe you can ask them about it. Scott finished the rest of the work and drove home without stopping. He really couldn't figure out why his parents knew that Sabrina was his girlfriend. Why did they hide these things from him? And why would they agree to her marrying right? Mrs. Volker was sitting in the garden drinking afternoon tea, and when she learned that Scott had returned without looking up, she knew that Scott was going to come sooner or later. Tell me, what do you want to ask? Mrs. Volker didn't give Scott a single look, and looked down intently to tease the puppy. You know Sabrina is my girlfriend. Why do you want her to marry my brother? Oh. You know Sabrina is your girlfriend, huh? I thought you were her enemy. Mrs. Volker's words are full of yin and yang. Do you think she's your girlfriend? What have you done to her in the past 5 years? Do you think you're dad and I don't know? How many times have we advised you? Have you listened? Sabrina is such a good girl. She is infatuated with you, and you will do whatever you want with other people's love, now that people are dead to you, and you look for her again. Do you have a problem with your brain? Scott was dumbfounded by Mrs. Volker, and after thinking for a long time, he could only argue in a low voice. But she has a marriage contract with me. How can she? That's enough. Mrs. Volker interrupted him with a cold face. Sabrina took the initiative to tell us that she was going to break the engagement, and people have been completely disappointed in you. Don't you understand? And, don't forget. Who was the person who really kissed Sabrina back then? It was you who occupied your brother's position for so many years. Now that the two of them have finally achieved positive results, I will never allow you to disturb them again. Scott left dejected, in a bad state of mind, and he almost had a car accident on the way back. After about a week, Margaret called him. Scott, the doctor said I'm recovering well and I'll be discharged in a few days, so you have to come and pick me up. Listening to Margaret's sweet voice, Scott only felt irritated in his heart, but he patiently agreed. On Margaret's day of discharge, Scott rushed to the hospital as soon as he was busy with his work. Halfway through, the assistant suddenly called him. Mr. Scott, I have found out the truth of Miss Sabrina's video back then, and in addition, I have found out some things related to Miss Margaret. The wards are hidden, and Scott is about to push the door in, only to see Margaret lying in good spirits on the hospital bed playing games and chatting with her best friend. Her best friend looked at her with some concern. It's only been 2 weeks. Are you sure you're not acting? Aren't you afraid Scott knows? Margaret dismissed. He's been busy with work every day during this time. So how can he have time to delve into this? If I had known that Sabrina's slut was married, I wouldn't have had to play the scene of physical rejection. That being said, you've recovered too quickly, and your wounds haven't fully healed yet. Tattooed wounds. Scott is stupid. When is she going to get a tattoo? How does he not know? If it weren't for the fear that Scott would know, I wouldn't have bothered to get the tattoo and die of a scar. Margaret seemed to think of something, and the corners of his mouth hooked into a smile. But it's also earned. A tattoo in exchange for a kidney of that woman. It's worth it. Scott certainly didn't know that I hadn't been in a car accident at all. I didn't have a ruptured kidney. I didn't have a massive hemorrhage, and it was worth it to simply buy a doctor and cost Sabrina most of her life. It's a pity that her life is hard, and she won't die even if she is tortured like this. Tisk. Scott slowly pushed the door open and walked in, exuding an icy aura that frightened Margaret. After a while, she changed into a delicate little flower and smiled at him. Scott, you're here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. I've been waiting for a long time. Scott's words sounded inexplicable, but Margaret had a bad feeling in his heart. She asked tentatively, what are you waiting for? When did you get here? He looked at her with a non-smirk. I really didn't think your car accident was faked. Margaret's face turned pale. She still wanted to explain something, and the next second, Scott choked her neck. You can be considered to have lied to me completely. What else? I don't know. I can still consider sparing your life after explaining it. She wanted to continue to deny it, but Scott's hand grew harder and harder, suffocating and making her face purple. Margaret knew that he was really going to kill her, so he hurriedly begged for mercy. I said, you, first let me go. Margaret slammed to the ground, greedily breathing in fresh air and coughing. I faked the accident. And I paid the doctor to tell him how serious my condition was. And I asked the doctor to get Sabrina's kidney and say that she was fit to donate blood. But Scott, I do it because I like you. I really love you. Sabrina betrayed you. She doesn't deserve your liking. Do you see how good I am?" The door was suddenly pushed open, and the assistant hurried in, not even breathing. He panted, "Mr. Scott, the truth of the video I investigated is all in it." Scott stared at Margaret on the ground. He said, "That video is fake, and Miss Margaret found someone to fake it. Miss Sabrina never betrayed you from beginning to end." Scott slapped Margaret hard. "Mean woman, you dare to stir up feelings between me and Sabrina. It's all because of you that she left me." He kicked Margaret a few times with almost all his strength. And she lay on the ground and wailed, "Bring this mean woman back for me, and I'm going to interrogate her personally." After the bodyguard takes Margaret away, the assistant hands Scott a bag of papers. He opened the file bag and pulled out the contents. And with each page he flipped, Scott's face became more gloomy. In the dimly lit basement, Margaret is hung from an iron frame with her hands tied, and she still has the scars from being beaten by Scott in the hospital. The door was pushed open, and Scott walked in with a blank face, but the anger he emanated from him let everyone know that he was in a state of extreme anger now. Margaret's first reaction to Scott coming in was fear, but then she begged him as if she had seen a savior. She was delusional that Scott might miss her old feelings and let her go, but she forgot how Scott could have treated Sabrina like this if he had missed his old love, and how could he have tormented Sabrina for 5 years. "I really love you. And everything I do is because I love you so much. Now that Sabrina is married, then you can't do it. Why don't you marry me? I will really use my life to be good to you." He looked at Margaret like a clown, and he pinched her face so hard that it seemed like he was going to crush her bones. "What are you? I'm only with you because you're Sabrina's friend. You're just a tool for me to stimulate her. How could I love someone like you?" Scott then pulls out a stack of photos and throws them at her, where she desperately tries to kill herself after seeing what is on them. Those are full of pictures of Margaret sleeping with different men, and in each of them, Margaret's face is extremely enjoyable, and Margaret was so frightened that his face was bloodless, and he was already incoherent. She trembled and stammered to explain, but she couldn't speak for a long time. "Margaret, is that what you call loving me?" "Scott, listen to me. These photos are fake. They are all fake. You must not believe them. I really love you. I love you so much." "Oh, spurious. Like the video you faked Sabrina back then." As she spoke, Scott kicked her, spitting out a mouthful of blood, and she couldn't speak in pain. Outside the door, several men walked in, and Margaret saw Margaret with a glint in his eyes like a dog to a bone. "Such a lack of men, isn't it? Then I'll make you happy." After receiving the order, several men pounced on Margaret like hungry wolves. Margaret's desperate struggle to no avail let out a desperate scream. When the men had had enough, Scott ordered Margaret to be dragged to the 3rd floor. Margaret was at the mercy of a dead dog. Covered in wounds and stains, the bodyguards simply helped her with hemp rope, dropped her directly from the 3rd floor, and then pulled her back, repeating the act over and over again. Margaret felt the knot of the rope loosening and was so frightened that she couldn't speak, and knelt on the ground and kowtowed and begged for mercy while the bodyguards pulled her back. "I really know it's wrong. It's me who made a mistake. It's me who is sorry, Sabrina. I'm never going to do it again. Please let me go." Scott gently brushed aside the messy shredded hair on her forehead, an act that gave Margaret hope, but the next second, her hope was dashed. Scott laughed like a demon as he ordered the bodyguards to untie her rope and drop her down the stairs. Margaret broke both legs and collapsed in a pool of blood. Before she fell unconscious, she saw Scott come over and pat her on the face, whispering, "Don't worry. The game has just begun. Sabrina's suffering. I will make you pay back 100-fold." Margaret was woken up by a sharp ache and found herself lying in a hospital bed with no treatment for her injuries. She watched her life worse than death, and remembered the nightmarish experience, and her hatred for Sabrina reached its peak. Originally, she was about to become Mrs. Volker, but obviously she was about to succeed. And it was because of Sabrina that she came to this end. Thinking about it, she hammered the hospital bed hard, and the loud noise coincided with the sound of the door opening. The 2 doctors walked in together, and Margaret thought that someone had finally come to treat her. And she was immediately ecstatic, eager to put the doctor's hand on it immediately. One of the doctors handed her a cup and said, "Drink this." Margaret looked at him warily, reluctant to reach out and take it. "What is this?" "Glucose drink." She really thought that the doctor was here to save her, so she quickly drank the cup in 3 or 2 sips, completely, not noticing that the taste and color of the cup of glucose were wrong. But what Margaret didn't expect was that instead of going through the examination process, the doctor pushed her out of the hospital bed. She sensed something was wrong and struggled to get out of her hospital bed. Another doctor grabbed her with quick hands and trapped her in the hospital bed. At first, she still had the strength to struggle, but gradually she found that she could not move. could not even lift her hand, and could only look around in fear. The two doctors pushed her to the door of the operating room, and she saw Scott walking to the bedside. Scott's surroundings exuded an extremely cold aura, and his tone was extremely cold. Take one of her kidneys, don't need to inject anesthetic, and go straight to the knife. Sabrina suffered, and she should repay it 100-fold. He looked down at Margaret, who felt like she was looking at the demon. I added muscle stiffener to the glass you just drank, and you can't move. But you're absolutely awake, and enjoy it slowly. I told you, the game has just begun. The incandescent light of the operation pierced her eyes, and fear spread throughout her body. The doctor gave her an amphetamine injection to ensure that she was able to complete the entire operation in an absolutely conscious state. The sharp blade sliced through Margaret's skin, amplifying her perception of pain, and the pain was so intense that she wanted to die instantly. She passed out once during the operation, and even amphetamines could not keep her awake, but as soon as she fainted, a nurse would forcibly wake her up, and she had to be completely awake to feel the pain. After a simple stitch, Margaret was wheeled back into her room, desperate enough to cry, staring at the ceiling with vacant eyes and a growing hatred for Sabrina and Scott. After less than half an hour's rest, Scott came in with another group of doctors and nurses. 2 nurses surrounded her. One left and one right, holding in their hands the equipment used to draw blood, the needle several times thicker than the usual one used to draw blood. Give me her blood. I can't stop pumping if I can't pump enough 1,000 cubic centimeters. One of the nurses looked embarrassed, but she just finished taking her kidney. Will she be killed if she draws blood like this? Hearing this, Scott's heart began to hurt again. Sabrina was tortured to the point of death by herself in this way. And he couldn't imagine how desperate she was at that time. Smoke directly. She won't die so easily. Margaret hurled as much as she could, insulting Scott with the dirtiest words. No matter how much Margaret scolded him, Scott was indifferent. But when she scolded Sabrina, Scott slapped her in the face hard. If you dare to scold Sabrina again, I'll have your tongue pulled out. Margaret faints straight after the blood draw. And Scott looks at her in disgust and waves her hand to throw her outside, leaving her to fend for herself. He looked at Sabrina's picture on his phone and muttered to himself, Sabrina, I've already punished Margaret for you. Can you forgive me? The Margaret's status in the business circle is far less than that of the Volkers, so to speak. They have just stepped into their circle, whether it is connections, resources, or asset value, compared to the Volker family. It is simply a drop in the bucket. Scott wasn't the main talker of the Volkers, but bringing down the Margaret family was as simple as trampling an ant to death on the ground, overnight. Companies large and small canceled their partnerships with Margaret, even at the cost of hefty liquidated damages. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that this is the Volker family's deliberate attempt to bring down the Margaret family, and no one dares to offend the Volker family. So they can only terminate the contract. Although the Margaret family received liquidated damages, they also lost a large amount of liquidated damages due to the disconnection of the production chain due to the cancellation of the cooperation. And they could not deliver the goods on time. Coupled with this situation, no one will be willing to cooperate with the Margaret family in the future, and the Margaret family will no longer have a foothold. Seeing that he has gone from being the daughter of Margaret's family to being a ghost, not even a beggar, Margaret is eager to cut Scott and Sabrina with 1,000 cuts. Sabrina has been living in Germany since she got married. First, Volker's overseas industry is here, and Wright has to stay in Germany most of the time. Second, Mr. Sylvester Mrs. Sylvester also moved the Sylvester family property to Germany many years ago, and settled in Germany herself. It wasn't until she was with Wright that Sabrina felt firsthand what true love looks like, because Sabrina loves flowers. The flowers in the house are changed every day, all kinds of flowers she has seen and have never seen before, but there are always violets anyway. He said, you like violets, so I'll find a way to make the violets around you never wither. She's always loved to draw, but the last 5 years have been put on hold because of Scott. Wright would buy her all kinds of paints and good paintings, would be her character model without getting bored, and would encourage her and give her fair advice to help her grow. He said, painting is your ideal, and you are my ideal, you just chase it, I will protect you. Sabrina said that she wished she could hold a small exhibition where she could exhibit her paintings that she was satisfied with. Wright enlisted experienced seniors to help organize it. And he would absolutely respect her ideas and accompany her silently when she was creating. I respect any decision you make, everything is the result of your efforts, and I only provide a small help, he said. Wright always said to Sabrina, you are like a delicate and blooming rose, and the rose is better than the sun. so when Wright told her about the changes in the country, she just smiled and didn't speak. Wouldn't you be happy to hear Margaret's fate? He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind and gently pecked her face. I just feel very sad. Obviously I don't have to end up like this. She is to blame. I used to hate Margaret and Scott, but when I let go of it completely, I didn't even hate it. So I don't care how they are now, I just want to be with you. But Wright buried her head in her shoulder socket. But if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't have met again. Sabrina couldn't help but laugh out loud when she saw Wright, who was usually cold and decisive in the mall, show such a side in front of herself. The two looked at each other affectionately and couldn't help but kiss passionately. When they both collapsed on the bed, an uninvited guest came to the manor. The servants knocked at their door suddenly. "Serve, Mrs. There's a guest coming." Sabrina was stunned for a moment. She didn't have to think about it to know who it was. She just sighed. It's better not to discuss people in broad daylight. It was unpleasant to have his enthusiasm interrupted, and when he learned that it was Scott, Wright's face was darker than coal, and he was exposed to the smell of no one entering. She appeared in the living room with Wright in her arms, and Wright almost carved the words "Declaration of Sovereignty" on her face. Sabrina, frustrated and funny, and pinched his cheek. "What are you doing here? Scott doesn't mean to you. I'm just trying to be on guard." The intimacy between husband and wife stung Scott deeply, and he couldn't accept that Sabrina was so close to another man, and Sabrina could only be his. "Sabrina, I really know it's wrong. I've punished Margaret severely. Come back to me. We'll get married right away. We'll live a good life." Scott's eyes were red and he wanted to come over and pull her. She frowned tightly and shouted, "Stand, don't come over." Scott stopped his movements for a moment and stood still. "I thought I made it clear last time. I said not to show up in my life again. What about you and Margaret? I don't care at all now. I have and will only have a brother and sister-in-law relationship with you, and I have let go of all the previous things. You obviously don't love my brother, you love me. Don't talk angrily, okay? I really know it's wrong. Forgive me." Regardless of who was there, Scott knelt down in front of Sabrina with a bang, and the apology in his eyes was genuine. Sabrina watched him kneel coldly, indifferent. "I say it again, I don't love you anymore. I love your brother right now, and I will only love him in the future. Don't bother me anymore. Doing so will only make me hate you." With that, she pulled Wright and turned to go upstairs. Wright looked at him mockingly and called for the servants and bodyguards. "Send them off." Naturally, Scott refused to leave, and in the end, 2 bodyguards carried him out, one left and one right. He didn't leave, just kneeling in the courtyard all the time. By night, when even the servants had gone back to their rooms to rest, Sabrina looked out the window and saw Scott kneeling. To be honest, she was a little stunned. She had never seen that tall Scott look so humble, and she was a little speechless all of a sudden. "You're not going to be soft-hearted, are you?" Wright hugged her as if he had read what was going on in her heart. Sabrina kissed him soothingly on the lips. "There's no way I'm soft on him. It's less than a 10 millionth of what he did to me." She kissed Wright's Adam's apple emotionally and looked at him with silky eyes, her hands reaching down from his abs. Wright's breathing grew heavier and his voice became hoarse. "Baby, complete what we didn't finish today, and comfort you by the way." The blood-pumping moans stood out even more in the night, crushing Scott's heart. He could only endure all this in silence. With endless regret in his heart, Scott knelt in the manor for 3 days and 3 nights, even when it rained heavily. For 3 days, he didn't get a drop of water, and several times he almost fainted, but he gritted his teeth and survived. He was confident that Sabrina would always forgive him. Sabrina thought about it and decided to call him in. She was worried that something would happen to him if she continued like this. "Mr. Scott, our lady told you to come in." The servant lifted him up. Overjoyed, Scott limped in. "Sabrina, are you willing to forgive me? I called you in because I wanted to take this opportunity to make it clear to you thoroughly, so that you would die of this heart." Sabrina's cold words were like a basin of water, extinguishing all the hopes that Scott had just ignited. "Sabrina," Scott was about to say something, but was cut off by her. "I'm talking to you very calmly now, and I really hope that this is the last time you'll come to me." Wright was stupid when he came home from the office and saw Scott. He was worried that what he had done as a child would happen again, and he couldn't afford to lose Sabrina again. "What are you doing here?" Wright is like a dog that has been robbed of its owner, ready to blow up at any moment. Staring at Scott warily, Sabrina gently rubbed the top of his hair and kissed his cheek. "I called him in. I wanted to make it all clear, Scott. You don't have to think about what you have to do to make it up to me, because you can't make it up to me in this life." Hearing this, Scott stood up and tried to kneel again, but she stopped him in time. Sabrina looked at Scott calmly, in a very breezy tone, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. 5 years ago, When you received an anonymous video, you said that person was me, countless times. I have explained to you countless times. Whether it is I begging and begging, or I am almost crazy and roaring, angrily forcing you to listen to me. But you have not believed my words once, you only believe the video. As a well-known Volker, verifying the authenticity of a video is a breeze. But you didn't even check whether the video was real or not, and you just chose to believe it. Sabrina's eyes reddened as she spoke. Is that the kind of person I am in your heart? You say Margaret is wrong, aren't you wrong? On the day of the charity dinner, you said that you watched me push her downstairs, and I explained in every possible way that she framed me. Did you believe me even a little? Scott, we've known each other for more than 10 years, don't you want to give me this trust? Speaking of the back, Sabrina almost choked up and roared. If it weren't for Wright supporting her by her side, she would have fallen long ago. You know I'm afraid of heights. But don't you think what you did to me that day is excessive, Scott? You promised to protect me forever and never hurt me again, but in the past 5 years, every wound on my body has been given by you. And it is you who have caused me to be like this with your own hands. You said you punished Margaret, but Scott, did you punish yourself? Margaret is at fault, she hurts me, but you are the most wrong. It was your disbelief in me again and again that caused her to have the opportunity to sow discord, and it was you who kept conniving at her to hurt me and bully me, which caused her to become even worse. It's all because of you, Scott. Sabrina cried uncontrollably, and all the grievances in her heart exploded at once, and the pain she had endured for 5 years was finally vented. You said you would compensate me. How would you compensate me? You can't make it up to me in your life. And the last thing you can do for me is not to show up in my life again. She folded her hands and bowed to him with great sincerity. Please, let me go. Wright listened to these words, and his heart was so distressed that he burst into tears, and he hugged her tightly in his arms. I swear I'll protect you in the future, Sabrina, and I'll never let anyone hurt you again. Sabrina tugged at his clothes and buried herself in his arms and wept. Knowing full well that the man in front of her really loved her, Scott left silent, thinking back to the accusations Sabrina had just made against him. On the street, a car is speeding up, and the shrill horn finally calls Scott's spirit back. And he looks at the speeding car in horror and freezes in place. In the nick of time, Wright pushed him hard to the side. At about the same time, the car passed by Scott, but every second was too late. What are you doing? Wright walked over and grabbed Scott by the collar, pulled him up, and asked, Don't you want your life? Scott shook his hand away and smiled wryly. What else can I do? You're my brother. Why did you snatch the person I love the most? At the beginning, you said that you loved Sabrina more than your own life. So even if you are reluctant, I gave you a chance, but you yourself are useless, and you hurt her like this, the first time I met her. She was as delicate and lovely as a porcelain doll, but when I saw her again, she had all kinds of old and new wounds on her body. Isn't this all the love you said? The more Wright thought about it, the more angry he became, and he slammed a punch into Scott's face. I warn you, if you dare to disturb Sabrina again, there will be no friendship between brothers. I'm not going to give up on Sabrina, I'm going to make her change her mind. Scott wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and turned to leave. Scott bought a villa not far from the Volker family estate and made meetings with Sabrina every day. For example, when Sabrina goes for a walk after dinner, he will walk with her for a short distance under the pretext of walking the dog. For example, when Sabrina is alone in the back garden of the house for afternoon tea, he will order more pastries and don't want to waste them, and then send them over. And he doesn't care if she throws the cake directly into the trash. For example, when Sabrina and her sisters go out to dinner, he will always appear at the next table very coincidentally, and then excuse that they are very close. Sabrina was harassed by Scott and was about to have a nervous breakdown, and she didn't want to tell Wright. But recently Volker's big project was in an important stage, and Wright worked overtime at the company every day until late to come home, sometimes even after a hurried meeting. They have to rush back to continue the meeting, so after thinking about it, she still didn't bother Wright, but she was so annoyed that she was about to collapse, and after much thought, she decided to go to Scott. There was a knock on the door, and Scott opened it angrily, overjoyed to see who was coming, but before he could say a word, Sabrina's slap landed on his face. What the hell are you trying to do, Scott? He was stunned by the sudden slap, and then quickly explained. I didn't mean to disturb you, I just wanted to see you more. I really knew that I was wrong and wanted to make amends to you. Compensation, Sabrina laughed sarcastically and pathetically, lifting her clothes to reveal the ugly scars from when her kidney was taken. You tell me, how do you compensate me? When you insisted that I donate a kidney to Margaret, Did you think about my feelings? Did you know that I almost died on the operating table? The scar was particularly striking on his fair skin, and Scott trembled and wanted to touch the scar that he had left because of him, but he never dared to touch it. My missing kidney is irreversible in this life, just like our relationship. It is impossible in this life. Hearing this, Scott immediately took out his mobile phone and wanted to call the doctor. I'm going to have someone take my kidney out for you now, so can you forgive me? Sabrina was really annoyed. She was speechless for a moment, looking at him like a madman. I didn't say it. If you pester my wife again, I will make you pay. Wright's voice suddenly came from behind her, and Sabrina turned to look at him in delight and threw herself into his arms. Scott's heart throbs. He just wants to get Sabrina's forgiveness. Why is it so hard? Give me 24 hours to watch Scott. I don't want him to take a step out of the house. Wright brought in a large group of bodyguards and imprisoned Scott in the villa. This is a final warning, Scott. Think it through, and I won't show mercy next time. According to the bodyguards, Scott was not restless even when he was imprisoned, either clamoring to see Sabrina or trying to sneak out while the servants and bodyguards were not looking. But he was caught just before he was ready to act. Wright was sad and held his forehead in meditation. Scott was really excessive. But they were still brothers, and he couldn't really do anything too much to Scott. Sabrina leaned on his shoulder and proposed, "Why don't we call Mom and Dad and ask them to talk to Scott? It seems like that's all there is to it." Wright called Mr. Volker in China and explained everything Scott was up to. Although most of Volker's industry and resources have migrated here, there are still large branches in China, so it has always been Scott who is in charge of the domestic business. And Wright is in charge of the overall situation abroad. At that time, Scott left the country without doing anything, causing all domestic affairs to come to a standstill, and Mr. Volker and Mrs. Volker had to take charge of the overall situation themselves. The second elder himself was very angry because of his irresponsible behavior, and after learning what he had done, he was even more angry and speechless, so he hurriedly booked a plane ticket and flew to Germany on the same day. When the doorbell rang, Scott thought it was Sabrina looking for him again, and ran down to open the door, only to see Mr. Volker, Mrs. Volker, and was stunned. "Dad, Mom, why are you here? Evil barrier." Mr. Volker slapped him angrily. "What the hell do you want to do when you come to Germany without saying a word and let me clean up the mess with your mother? I told you back then, don't bother Sabrina and Wright. Do you take my words as a deaf ear, Mrs.?" Volker slapped him in the other cheek as well. "You pack up your things and go back to China with me now. The company still has a lot of things to deal with for you. I'm not going back. Dad, Mom, I'm going to have to beg Sabrina to forgive me." Scott knelt down again. "More recently than in the past combined. Can you help me persuade Sabrina too? She respects you so much. She will listen to you when you say it." Mr. Volker was so angry that he didn't know what to say. So he picked up a decorative stick and hit Scott, and after a few blows, Scott couldn't bear it and fell to the ground. Actually, Mr. Volker, Mrs. Volker didn't feel distressed, but they knew that they couldn't let Scott go on like this. Otherwise it would only be more difficult to control, so they could only teach him a hard lesson. After a few more sticks, Scott was already vomiting blood, and still didn't want to let go, still insisting on staying with Sabrina. All of a sudden, the second elder had no choice but to call Wright. Wright's face was full of disappointment, and his tone was cold and unmistakable. "Forcibly take Scott back to China for custody. No matter what method you use, tie him up or beat him, bring him back to me. No one is allowed to release him without my orders." The two elders didn't have any opinions, and they were too disappointed in Scott in their hearts, and it was all up to Wright's arrangement. "Dad, Mom, the affairs of the domestic company are hard for you to follow more, and I will also hold a video conference for the senior management over there, so that they can directly connect with me if they have anything. This is tantamount to telling everyone in disguise that Scott is no longer the top head of the domestic company, and all his power has been taken back. I'm just letting you think quietly at home now, and if you're still unrepentant, be prepared to spend the rest of your life alone in the house." Wright shook off a sentence with a cold face, and turned away with Mr. Volker, Mrs. Volker. After returning home, Scott took a break for a while, and both Mr. Volker and the Wright-assigned caretaker said that he had been doing well lately and was living a normal life at home. Wright didn't have much to do with him either, and he had an even more important thing to do lately, preparing for Sabrina's birthday party. She doesn't really celebrate her lunar birthday, and her friends and relatives spend the same birthday as she does on the Gregorian calendar. But Wright is determined to celebrate the lunar birthday, he said. "I know that you have been miserable every year on your birthday for the past 5 years, so I want to make you happy every birthday in the future. And a new life should have a successful start, and birthdays are no exception, and if it's you, no matter what birthday it is, it should be taken seriously. Sabrina was moved to tears, and she didn't stop him. It is a very beautiful thing to be loved, and it is irreplaceable happiness to be loved by the person you love. Before the video incident, Sabrina did most of the annual birthday party herself. It's not like Scott hasn't said that she will leave it to someone else, but she is worried that she will not meet her own requirements. So she has always followed up on her own. But this time it was different. Wright asked her in detail about the banquet format and various requirements she was looking forward to, and then he personally contacted the person in charge of each process. The day before her birthday, Wright arrives at the party blindfolded Sabrina and says he wants to surprise her. When the lights came on, every furnishing in the banquet hall was perfectly matched with the ideal look in her heart. And even the details did not deviate the slightest. Sabrina kisses Wright's lips in surprise, and the two linger for a moment before letting go of each other. Her eyes were red and her voice was a little choked. "Thank you, Wright, I'm really happy. I told you I would give you the best of the world." On her birthday, Sabrina received 2 copies of the Volker family's share transfer agreement, one from Wright, and the other was sent by whom, it goes without saying. Wright looked at the other agreement, and his teeth itched with hatred, and he wanted to fly back home and beat Scott again. Sabrina also looked at the agreement with mixed feelings, and didn't know what to do for a while. She really wanted Scott to understand that he owed her and couldn't pay it off in his life. After thinking about it for a moment, she called Scott. "Scott, I'm Sabrina." Scott didn't expect her to call herself, and almost fell off her chair in excitement. "Sabrina, what's the matter with you? I received your equity agreement, and I've given it to Wright, and I won't accept it." "Sabrina, I just wanted to give you a birthday present." She was stunned for a moment, thinking back to the years they had been together. Scott had never remembered her lunar birthday, let alone the past 5 years. Now that they're separated, Scott is hooked. Sabrina chuckled. "There's no need anymore. We won't have any relationship with each other anymore. So I don't need your birthday present for me. Besides," Sabrina paused, "this is the last time I'll speak to you, and I ask you not to show up again, or I'll let you never know anything about me for the rest of your life, and I won't let you see me again." There was endless silence on the other end of the line. It's been so long that Sabrina thinks Scott has hung up. Scott spoke suddenly, his voice trembling. "Okay, I see." At this moment, Scott finally accepted the cruel fact that Sabrina would not change her mind again, and Sabrina would never have anything to do with him for the rest of her life. Wright wrapped his arms around her waist from behind and kissed her black hair. "Who are you calling?" "To your brother. I don't think he will bother us from now on." Ever since talking to Sabrina on the phone that day, Scott has been in a state of flux, drinking heavily in his room, crying and apologizing to Sabrina. The curtains in the room were tightly closed, and there had been no sunlight for a long time, and at night, his room was pitch black, and nothing could be seen. The long period of absence from light and alcohol caused Scott to become so weak that it seemed as if the wind could carry him away. No matter who tried to persuade him, he was unmoved, and it seemed that only by torturing himself in this way could his heart feel better. Until this day, the servant knocked on his door. "Young master." Someone outside the door said they wanted to see you. He picked up the bottle in his hand and smashed it against the door. "I said I wouldn't see anyone." The loud noise frightened the servant, but she stubbornly continued. "The woman said her name was Margaret and said you would definitely see her." "Margaret, this is the culprit who broke him apart from the person he loves the most." Scott jerked down half of the bottle. "Call her in." As soon as he went downstairs, he saw a madman-like woman sitting on the couch, staring at a group photo of Scott hugging Sabrina with a happy smile on her face. Hearing the footsteps, Margaret immediately turned back. His eyes filled with tears, and 2 lines of tears flowed endlessly. "Scott, you're finally willing to see me. Please save me." Scott coldly watched her crawl to her knees like a dog in front of her, kicking her away in disgust. "Don't come near me. I'm disgusting." Margaret didn't care about his attitude. She just cried and begged her. At that time, the surgery for the removal of the kidney was too rudimentary, the sterile environment was not in place, and the sutures were only hastily sutured up and the wound was finished. In addition, after the surgery, Scott left her on the street and did not receive proper care, resulting in Margaret's wound becoming infected and suffering from multiple complications. A few days ago, Margaret was so uncomfortable that she went to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor didn't know about her past, but looked at her with some pity. "The examination report shows that your kidneys are failing, and you only have 1 kidney left, and you need to have a kidney replacement as soon as possible." The doctor's words were like a boomerang, and they hit Margaret's heart right now. She knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Scott. Scott, for the sake of the 2 years I've been with you, help me, I really don't want to die. Scott burst out laughing, almost maniac. Margaret, you have today, these are your retribution. At that time, you bribed the doctor and deceived me that your kidneys were failing, causing me to forcibly take Sabrina's kidney. Now you really have kidney failure, but no one can save you. Everything is your own fault. Please, Scott, help me. You can repay me whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. I really don't want to die. Scott sneered and called for someone to beat her hard, especially to take care of her diseased kidney and torn wounds. Margaret huddled in place, desperately trying to protect his wounds, but he was still beaten and bleeding. Throw her out when you're done. Don't dirty my place. He dropped a word in disgust and went back to his room, not even giving Margaret a look. Scott didn't see the hatred and resentment in Margaret's eyes as he turned around. For half a month, Scott didn't have any more aggressive or inappropriate behavior. Wright felt sorry for his younger brother and ordered the grounding order to be lifted and the people who were spying on him after making sure that he would probably not make any more waves. Scott didn't disappoint Wright either. And the first thing he did after regaining his freedom was to buy a plane ticket to Germany, but he didn't tell anyone about it. He just went back to that villa and watched Sabrina silently every day. Scott was relieved, as long as he could see Sabrina. It didn't matter if he could be with her or not. When Sabrina invites a friend to come home for a party, he will silently pour himself a glass of red wine and clink glasses with her. When he sees Sabrina painting in the garden, he will sit quietly by the window and watch her, and he will not feel tired all day long. When he saw Sabrina and Wright snuggling together, he endured the pain in his heart and blessed them from the bottom of his heart. For Scott, being able to watch Sabrina quietly like this is already a rare blessing. Ever since the last time she saw Margaret again, Scott's heart had been so uneasy that he had sent someone to spy on her. First, I was afraid that she would trouble Sabrina because of the successive blows. Second, Scott didn't want her to die too happily. Otherwise it would be too cheap for her. The assistant would report Margaret's situation and whereabouts to him every day, so that he could get a general idea of what Margaret had been up to lately, in case something unexpected happened. When Scott woke up that day, he found that there were several missed calls from his assistant on his phone, and he instantly had a bad premonition in his heart and quickly called back. Mr. Scott, Margaret is gone. The assistant's panicked voice came. All the people sent to spy on her said that they couldn't find any trace of her. Margaret now lives with her father and mother, and goes to the hospital every 2 days for follow-up visits, and rarely goes out during the day. When it was close to 10 o'clock in the evening, she would go to the nearby supermarket with her bag on her back to buy discounted food. The doctor said that if she could no longer find the source of the kidney, then there was no hope of a cure. The dignified daughter of Margaret's family has now ended up in this situation. To this day, Margaret has not been seen in the hospital since she went to the hospital for a follow-up. And when the watchman noticed that something was wrong and went in to look for her, there was no one to find her. The assistant hurriedly reported to Scott, and then sent more people to find him. But Margaret usually went to no place with her, and she didn't even return home, as if she had evaporated from the world. Scott ignored Wright's warning and called him as soon as possible. Wright, you've been sending more people to protect Sabrina lately. Margaret is gone, and I'm worried about what she's going to do with Sabrina. Why are you? Wright's words were interrupted before he could finish his sentence. I'm also in Germany now, and I'll continue to look for Margaret's whereabouts. At the same time, I will also send my people to guard your neighborhood. And remember to tell me as soon as you have any questions. Wright was silent for a few seconds before responding. He knew it wasn't the time to mess with Scott, and nothing was more important than keeping Sabrina safe. He immediately dispatched a large number of people to secretly guard the vicinity of his home, and Sabrina also increased the number of security guards who traveled to Sabrina, and she had to be closely protected 24 hours a day wherever she went. On the other hand, Scott has been searching for Margaret's whereabouts, and has not rested for days and nights, staring at the Volker family estate with a telescope, for fear that he has missed something, but has never found anything. In an inconspicuous alley not far away, a sneaky woman stared at the Volker manor, her fists clenched. After being reminded by both Wright and Scott, Sabrina is almost closed to the house, and the necessary social interaction is to let friends come to the door. And the rest of the time is at home to read books and draw landscapes. Her best friend called her. It's my birthday. I want to go shopping. You know, we haven't been out in a long time. Sabrina was hesitant, still a little worried that Margaret would get into trouble for herself, but thinking that this is my best friend's birthday, and I haven't received any news for so many days. I haven't even seen any suspicious people, and there are so many bodyguards to protect me. So I think nothing should happen. Okay, where do we want to go? It's all up to you. When Scott learned she was going out, he was nervous. Margaret hasn't been found yet, it's dangerous. Don't go out. But I can't stay at home for the rest of my life. And if she really wants to deal with me, isn't this a chance for you to catch her? Seeing that she insisted on doing so, Scott no longer dissuaded her, but sent more people to follow her. The bodyguards sent by Wright and the bodyguards sent by him add up to enough to play 2 tables of mahjong, and Sabrina's best friend looked surprised. Do you usually go out like this? It's a special time? Sabrina looked at these bodyguards who surrounded them tightly, and she felt helpless, but she also knew that it was for the sake of safety, so she didn't resist. After eating an ice cream, Sabrina felt like her stomach was tumbling, and before she could say anything, she went straight to the bathroom. As soon as she pushed the door in, Sabrina was stunned from behind. When she woke up again, she found herself in an abandoned warehouse, her hands and feet firmly tied to a chair, and her mouth was taped to make no sound. She struggled desperately, and the chair swayed from side to side with a clanging sound. Stop struggling, no one will come to your rescue. Margaret's menacing voice rang out, and Sabrina jerked her head to see a beggar-like woman. Margaret's hair was all messed up because it was dirty, and the stains were messy one by one. The clothes on his body were also tattered, with all kinds of marks, and they emitted a foul smell. There were many scars on her face, old and new, and her eyes were hideous. Sabrina almost didn't recognize the lunatic-like woman in front of her as Margaret, and she was really a little scared. Margaret, how did you end up like this? It's not because of you, that I've become this ghost. I finally managed to get close to Scott. Why can't he let you go? Why are you still a high-ranking daughter, happily married, and Scott is dead set on you? Why should I have nothing? Margaret rushed over and slapped her in the face like crazy. Sabrina's face was red and swollen, and blood was spilling from the corners of her mouth. Why does Scott love you so much? Why does Wright love you so much? Why can you get everyone's love, and yet I become this person who is not a ghost? It's all your own fault. I treat you as my best friend, but what did you do to me? Sabrina interrupted her with a frown. Sabrina, don't pretend to be a good person here. I have nothing, and you don't have to think about it. She pulled out a lighter and shook it in front of Sabrina. That's when Sabrina realizes that gasoline is sprinkled all around, including herself and Margaret's bodies. Let's go to hell together, but I never thought of taking revenge on you, even if you hurt me like this. I didn't bother with you, did I? Sabrina was so anxious that she was about to cry, and she kept talking and talking. I've always considered you my best friend, so I just hope we'll all be okay with each other in the future. I promise you. I will help you intercede so that they will no longer hold you accountable. She kept praying in her heart that Wright would get here soon, and she really didn't know how much longer she could delay. Here, Sabrina's best friend found out that she was missing, and immediately told Wright the news and called the police. Wright contacted Scott again, and the 3 groups searched at the same time, turning almost the entire city upside down. Scott asked some friends in China, and finally found a little clue by analyzing the surveillance cameras of major streets with big data, and found the location of the abandoned warehouse according to the clues. He drove there as soon as possible, and sent the address to the police and Wright in the car. This is the location of Margaret and Sabrina. I'll drive over now, you hurry up and bring someone over. Before he could even walk into the warehouse, Scott could smell a heavy smell of gasoline. And his heart was ringing with alarm bells, praying that nothing would happen. When he saw Margaret holding the lighter in his hand, Scott's heart was beating wildly, and his hands and feet were shaking with nervousness. The sound of his footsteps attracted Margaret, and when she looked back at Scott, she collapsed. How can you come here? I will never allow you dog man and woman to be together, and you can't die together, saying that she was about to use a lighter. Scott hurriedly calmed her down. Margaret, listen to me. I have found a matching kidney source for you, and the doctor has also found you the most authoritative doctor. Will you go back with me for surgery? After the surgery, we went on to live our lives. Didn't you say you like children? When you're discharged from the hospital, we'll get married and have a lovely baby. Okay, Margaret gave a mocking smile. Do you think I'll still believe you today? Who doesn't know that you love Sabrina so much that you don't even care about the company? How can you love me? I didn't lie to you. I only found out that I really love you after losing you. Can you come back? Scott continued to hold her temper, silently calculating in her mind how long Wright would be before she arrived. She was stunned for a moment, and smiled sadly. At first, I approached you just for your money and power, but then I really loved you. Why don't you want to love me? Why do you have to love Sabrina? Scott was thinking about how to stall for more when he saw several figures flash by outside the window, and he knew it was Wright with someone. He looks at Wright, who is hiding behind cover, and winks at him, motioning for him to find a chance to save Sabrina. Scott kept talking to Margaret, and Wright reached over to untie Sabrina's rope, but unexpectedly, she was discovered by Margaret, who was a little shaken and instantly understood, and shouted in a broken heart, "It's all liars, it's all liars. In that case, then you two should also bury me with you." She set the surrounding items on fire, and with the blessing of gasoline, the fire spread rapidly. In a flash of light, Scott rushes over and shoves Wright and Sabrina, just as they are pushed out of the warehouse, while Margaret pulls them into the fire. Sabrina cried and screamed, "Scott!" In the last moments before being swept up in the fire, Scott smiled softly. "Sabrina, I love you." The police and firefighters arrived quickly, and when the firefighters rescued Scott from the fire, he had passed out with 10-grade burns all over his body. After the fire was extinguished, a charred corpse was brought out, and through DNA comparison, it was confirmed that the corpse was Margaret. When Sabrina visited Scott in the hospital with flowers, she was told that Scott had grade 10 burns on his skin and that he couldn't get a skin graft because of the severity of the injury. The smoke he inhaled while at the scene was too much, leaving him with permanent scars on his lungs. In addition, his lumbar vertebrae were hit, his nerves were damaged, and he would be paralyzed in the future, and only his head could move in his body. Her eyes turned red as she listened, and her heart ached and she couldn't breathe. Although Scott has done too many hurtful things to her, he has been punished a lot, but he didn't expect to end up like this. Wright rubbed Sabrina's hair and said softly, "I'm not going in with you. You guys have a good talk." In fact, it is only now that Wright really regrets it. If he hadn't agreed to change his identity because of his soft-heartedness towards Scott, perhaps none of this would have happened. Maybe he and Sabrina will be with each other since childhood, and they will be in love since they fell in love. Maybe Scott will slowly let go of Sabrina and find someone to love to spend the rest of his life with, happily married. Maybe Margaret and they will never know each other again, and she will be able to move forward steadily on the track of her life, without grudges and struggles. It's a pity that there is no regret medicine in the world, and there is no if in everything. Sabrina gently placed the bouquet on Scott's bedside, and his first reaction to seeing her come was delight. Then he panicked and turned his head to the other side. "Don't come to see me. I don't want you to see me like this. I'm afraid that my face is too hateful to scare you." Her eyes were red and she comforted gently. "It doesn't scare me. You saved me and Wright, and we're all very grateful to you. I owe you. I robbed my brother of the position. I hurt you for so many years. These are the retributions I deserve." Don't say anything about retribution and no retribution. It doesn't matter who is right or wrong in the past. Let's write it off. Each of us has learned a painful lesson. Scott looked at Sabrina, who was still so kind and beautiful, and cried, "Why don't I know how to cherish? Why couldn't I have more trust in you in the first place? But Sabrina, I really love you more than I love myself." Sabrina wiped away his tears. "From now on, we all have to start a new life. You must have hope in your heart. I believe that the future development of medicine will definitely cure you." Scott didn't speak, just stared straight at Sabrina. After a long time, he choked up and said, "Don't come to see me in the future. Promise me that you must be happy with my brother. As long as you are happy and happy, I will be satisfied." "Okay, I promise you, I will be happy." On the way home, Sabrina was silent and didn't say a word, and Wright didn't ask her. Just took her into his arms and gently comforted her. It had just rained, and there was damp moisture all around, and the smell of flowers and plants mixed with fresh earth made people can't help but sniff greedily. When she got off the bus, Sabrina was pleasantly surprised to see a rainbow in the sky, and she burst into tears and smiled as she took a picture of the beautiful rainbow. The rainbow symbolizes good luck, and I believe that our lives will all get better and better in the future, and all the bad things are gone. Wright took her hand and clasped her fingers together. "In the future, we will all be very good, and we will get better and better." Half a year later, the Volker family took the Volker family to the next level under Wright's leadership, and Mrs. Sylvester decided to retire from the top of the house. They wanted to leave the company in the hands of Sabrina, but she didn't know anything about business and wasn't interested in it at all, so in the end, the responsibility of taking care of Sylvester's house fell to Wright. Wright agreed, but it would be a little later, saying, "I want to take Sabrina on a trip around the world to make up for our honeymoon." Naturally, the parents of both sides were very much in favor, saying that they would be optimistic about the company's affairs when they traveled and waited for them to return. On the plane to Paris, Sabrina suddenly felt sick to her stomach and wanted to throw up. Wright was worried about her health and rushed her to the best local hospital as soon as he got off the plane. When the doctor came in with the report, Wright's nails were digging into the flesh, and he was even more nervous than Sabrina himself. He's already figured out that he will take care of Sabrina for the rest of his life, regardless of what happens to him. She will donate whatever she lacks, and she will not hesitate to give her life, the next second. The doctor congratulated them with a happy smile. "Congratulations, my wife has been pregnant for more than a month, and the child is very healthy." The sudden good news made both of them stunned, and it took a while to react. Wright hugged Sabrina tightly and said incoherently, "I'm going to be a dad. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you for bringing me such a nice gift. Thank you." Sabrina herself was very pleased, and she kept giving good news to both parents. In the early summer of the following year, Sabrina gave birth to a delicate and lovely daughter, with white and tender skin, bright eyes, an erect and small nose, and a pink cherry mouth. It's a replica of Sabrina. Wright was so happy that he was so happy with this kid that he was afraid of breaking it in his hand and melting it in his mouth, for fear that she would be hurt in the slightest. Mr. Volker When Mrs. Volker found out, she immediately transferred all the general property in her name to Sabrina. Mr. Sylvester Mrs. Sylvester also transferred all of the Sylvester family's property to Sabrina, and she is now worth much more than Wright. Not to be outdone, Wright transferred all the Volker shares, real estate and cars in his name to Sabrina's name. He kissed him affectionately. "I want to give you all the best things in the world, and I will give you the greatest protection. Even if there are any accidents in the future, you can live well, but we're only going to have this one child, okay?" Wright choked up suddenly, and Sabrina was about to ask, when he explained why. "Giving birth to a girl is like walking through the ghost door. I don't want you to suffer anymore. From now on, it is enough for our family of 3 to live happily." Looking at the man in front of her, Sabrina was convinced that she was the happiest woman in the world. She climbed up his neck. "Okay, I'll listen to you." They named their daughter Stephanie. Wright takes Sabrina and Stephanie on a vacation to the beach, and he stands behind his daughter with his arms around the sand castle on the beach, enjoying the beautiful sunset. The orange-yellow light shone on the bodies of the 3 of them, elongating their shadows. Wright and Sabrina kiss each other affectionately in a romantic sunset, and nothing will ever separate them. End of full text.